Well, to discuss this further from Warsaw, we have Polish MP Dominik Tarczynski. He is with the ruling Law and Justice Party. In the Romanian city of Cluj, we have Peter Balazs. He was Hungary's foreign minister under Viktor Orban's predecessor. He's now a professor of international relations at the Central European University. And in Bucharest, Craig Turp. He is the editor-in-chief of the think tank Emerging Europe. Thanks all so much for joining us. Craig, if I can, I'm going to start with you. What, if anything, should the EU do in the case of Poland and Hungary if they're breaking with core value structure? There would have to be consequences. Is funding cuts the best way forward?
I think that this is certainly a necessary step. I certainly think that at the moment the EU does not particularly have any real mechanism under which it can penalise any country for breaking away from, what it would consider core EU values. Obviously, we've seen that it has, begun Article 7 proceedings against Poland, but Article 7 proceedings require a unanimous vote. And at the moment, any one country can block Article 7 proceedings from going forward. So I certainly think that it needs to put in place a mechanism under which it does have the opportunity to sanction any country, whether it's Poland, whether it's Hungary, whether it's Romania, which it feels is breaking away from core European values.
Because if it doesn't get that mechanism in place, Craig, what do you think the consequences of that are?
I think it's difficult to countenance what exactly might happen. But certainly there have been cases of a number of countries around the EU of late, over the past couple of years, where they have certainly, not necessarily broken away from EU values, but they've gone their own way in terms of their attitudes towards the rule of law, in terms of state capture of otherwise independent institutions. So I think that, putting a mechanism in place and making sure that that mechanism is transparent, because what we're talking about here is transparency. It would be difficult for the EU to crack down on countries which it sees are not playing by the rules, unless the EU itself has its own very transparent rules.
Okay.
I think the proposal which came out last week was actually a little bit vague when it comes to the mechanisms that it would use. They would need to be very, very clear in order for this to work.
Okay, Dominik Tarczynski, let me ask you. I imagine you think the EU is really overstepping here.
Well, it's very, very simple. First of all, it's not about Poland and Hungary. This is about the whole Visegrad group and also about the others like Austria now after last elections, and also about the, as I mentioned, Czech Republic, Italy and others who do not agree with this madness which was implemented. I mean the illegal immigration within the European Union. And this is all about money. Germany started this madness looking for the cheap labor. They found out that some of them don't want to work but blow themselves up. So Madame Merkel decided to send them back, some of them, to Syria by military Hercules planes, but she cannot send all of them. By the way, Romania, I had a chance to speak to Foreign Minister of Romania some time ago, and he says we agreed to receive over 6,000 illegal immigrants, not refugee. There's a difference between refugee and illegal immigrant. He went to pick up the first 100 with the two buses, with the media, and when they found out that they are not going to Germany, they didn't know that they are going to Romania, they ran away. They ran away. So this is political business which was started by Germany, and I call it madness.
Okay, but Dominik, this isn't all about the refugee quota issue that you're referring to there. This is about Hungary and Poland not allowing their judicial branches to remain independent as per EU structure.
It's not true at all. This is what we can hear, but when you go into the detail, I am the lawyer. I'm a lawyer, so I'm trying to always look at the details. When I ask Mr. Timmermans in Strasbourg, what do you dislike? What is wrong with our bill, with our act, according to the European values and the European law? What is the one sentence which is against the European values and the rule of law? He couldn't answer. So we have a discussion which is not essential, but more kind of political for the media. As I said, I'd like to speak to the lawyers. Our government is in contact and we are open for the dialogue, but for the essential dialogue based on the facts.
Okay. Let me ask Peter then, do you think the EU is policing its member states in areas where it just has no business intervening?
Well, let's be very clear, what are we speaking about at all? We are not speaking about the refugee crisis. We are not speaking about migration. We are speaking about the new long-term budget of the European Union for the years 2021 to 27. And a new draft has come out from the European Commission on the 2nd of May. And this draft contains a very interesting proposal, a suggestion, which would assure the good use of EU money in all the member states. It is not speaking about Poland, it is not speaking about Hungary, about any country. It is speaking about the judicial, procedural, institutional background of using EU transfers in any EU country. And in that context, I think it's a logical and necessary element, because in the EU, everything is conditional. That transfer, which makes about 4% of the GDP in Hungary from EU resources, transfer based on solidarity from other member states, should be conditional as well. Conditions are not impossible. Conditions are transparent and logical. Possibly these countries should join the European Prosecutor Office. If not, they are supposed to cooperate with the European Prosecutor. And anyhow, they should assure the transparency and the good functioning of the judiciary and governance systems.
Okay, Craig, I just want to get your analysis now on what you've just heard from our other two panelists. What really is at play here? I mean, Peter says this isn't about immigration. It's not about the judiciary in Poland and Hungary. Does that make sense to you?
No, I don't think it does make sense. I mean, I don't think it's about immigration, but I do think it is about the rule of law. But it's also about making sure that the EU has the capacity by which it can ensure that if any member state, and it doesn't normally, it doesn't necessarily apply merely to Poland or merely to Hungary, but the EU wants to make sure that it has in place a mechanism by which it can sanction countries if the EU feels that those countries are not complying with EU core values.
Okay, because Dominik, it seems to some, the critics of Poland and Hungary inside the EU think that these are two countries, among some others as well, you're not completely alone here, that want to have their cake and eat it too.
Well, first of all, I'd like to speak about the details, about the facts, as I mentioned before. Okay, if Poland and Hungary is criticized because of the judiciary system, which is expected by our nation, by our people. That's why we are elected in such a huge numbers. So we would like to speak about the judiciary in Germany. Who is the one who is electing judges in Germany? Minister of Justice. In Poland, we don't have a direct appointing from the minister. We have National Board of Judges. That's the difference. So who is more radical and who is less democratic? Germany. What about French? What about Mr. Macron, who says that he wants to get rid of the tribunal court, the court which is the only one who can sentence and judge a president? What about Luxembourg? There is no tribunal court in practice. What about Dutch? Do they have a tribunal court? Of course they don't. And they say, oh, it's a different system. So if you want to have a European Union when everyone is equal, when you have a partnership, you have to be treated the same as everyone else. So I tell you what it is about. It's all about unhappiness, let me put it this way. Unhappiness from the leftists who can see the new governments who are elected in huge numbers. So they are not happy. We all know that they have a majority within the European institutions, leftists and liberals, and they are not happy with the democratic decisions in Poland, Hungary and others. That's it.
Okay.
Yes, but if I could just come in there for a moment. Dominik, is it not true, though, that the Venice Commission has not criticised Germany's judicial system, it's not criticised Holland's judicial system, but it did say in December of last year that the proposed changes to the Polish system represent a grave threat to the independence of the judiciary in Poland?
But we can talk about rule of law as well in Germany. Why the police in Germany was not allowed to let people know that there were rapes.
Yes, but Dominik, the point is that there are checks and balances in place
by the immigrants.
There are checks and balances in place already. The EU has a number of administrative units which look at these things around the union.
But who is the one to judge it?
And it has not found any grave errors. It has not found any grave threats anywhere at the moment, in fact, apart from a number of countries which unfortunately are in our part of the world, and Poland is one of them. In Poland, the Venice Commission has clearly said that the proposed changes to the judicial system represent a grave threat. And that's why the EU needs to put in place
Venice
this
Commission
mechanism
is
to
the
ensure
body
that
who advise.
if its grievances are not addressed, it has a way of sanctioning Poland.
Dominik, we understand you disagree with the Commission's findings there as well. Let me just get Peter in there. I mean, Peter, do you see this as just a case of some double standards and hypocrisy then on behalf of the EU's judgment here? Go ahead, Peter.
Well, let's be very clear. I think the colleagues were speaking about two different things. One is the ongoing investigation is forms in the case of Hungary and Poland about the fundamental values of the EU based on Article 7. This is the general problem. What I was speaking about is the new draft of the new long-term budget, which is not willing to treat the whole issue of the fundamental values. It is not about the fundamental values. It is dealing, there is in this Commission paper a very important suggestion that the good spending of the money should be transparent, should be surveilled by a transparent judiciary system, by a good governance, by a prosecutor, by all the necessary institutions and procedures that assure good use of the money. It is not naming any country for the time being. Those who have a bad conscience may believe that this is about them, but this is not about the countries which were named here. This is about any country.
But we have to look into the documents,
general,
and the most important document in the EU is a treaty. So this is very important. The treaty does not allow cohesion policy be bounded with the budget or rule of law be dependent on the budget. It has nothing to do with the treaty. So if we care about rule of law, we have to start from our principles and from the documents which all state members signed. Treaty, democracy, that's what it is. We cannot change the rules during the game, and that's how the European Commission is trying to play now with us. And as I said, not only in Poland or Hungary, but with others as well, only because they are unhappy with the governments elected recently.
Peter, quick response there.
If we are speaking about the treaties, we are referring about the treaties. The treaties are full with the balance of rights and obligations, with the transparency of the whole procedure. The Commission is just a servant of the member states. The Commission has put on the table a very good proposal with a lot of money for the next 7 years. And of course, the Commission is requiring some kind of transparency and conditionality. So there is no reason to protest against new money for these countries based on a transparent and well-designed system.
Okay, let me get back to Craig. Craig, I mean, we can't really deny now that there is a global trend moving in the same direction as we've seen Hungary and Poland move in toward arguably more authoritarian governments. I know they might not like that term, but that is what the EU has intimated here. There are some exceptions, of course, around the globe, but when do you think EU authorities should step in and just say, enough is enough, even if a democratic country has chosen to move toward these, populist, ultimately less democratic governments, we now need to step in?
As I said earlier, I think that the EU does have at its disposal a number of administrative units which would be able to come in and make a ruling on these things. It has the European Court of Justice, it has the Court of Auditors, which make their various reports on all of the member states. It also, of course, has at its disposal the Council of Europe's Venice Commission. So I certainly think that there are a number of independent arbiters which would be able to say that enough is enough. I also think, however, that it should be added that any sanction against any member of the European Union would only be a last resort. what the proposal which came out last week wants is simply to put something in place so that the EU has this option. I think that, you know, any kind of sanction would be a last resort, something that would come only when negotiations have completely broken down.
Do you worry, though, I mean, Craig, as many are concerned, that you talk about all these mechanisms and the institutions that exist within the EU to take care of this, that all in all it's just too vague and real steps can't be taken, especially, for example, when Hungary will have veto power, if a move is made, to punish Poland for its moves in the judiciary?
Poland has veto power as well.
Poland has veto, and vice versa, but go ahead, Craig.
At the moment, Hungary can block any sanction being taken against Poland. What the new proposal does is to make sure that that can't happen, because any sanction would be taken by reverse majority voting. So therefore, one member state would not be able to block any kind of sanction against another. But I also think we need to remember that what was published last week is only a proposal. It was a proposal published by the European Commission, and it was saying that this is what we want to happen. This is what we want to come into force when the new budget cycle begins in 2021. It's going to take more than a year of negotiation before the budget is finalised and before any of these proposals are put into law. So I think that we have a long way to go before, you know, any of this is actually, you know, put down in any kind of rule.
Okay, Dominik, let me ask you: do you think the EU is working for Poland and Polish values? Is it conducive with what the EU wants as a bloc?
Polish values are European values. And let me put it this way, don't get me wrong, but I want to make it clear. European Union, needs Poland and Hungary more than Poland and Hungary needs European institutions. We are the ones who are providing the real European values. The Roman law, Greek philosophers, rule of law and democracy. We are the ones who are fighting against this leftist way of thinking, which are destroying society. Because of the leftists who call themselves liberals, we have all these terrorist attacks in Europe. We have destruction of the Christian ideology and Christian roots. This is Europe. This is the history of Christianity as a continent and as a European Union. The founders of the European Union were Christians, and they cared about Christian values. So the question is, what are the values we are reaching for, and what is the future for the European Union? So again, we are equal. I'm trying to repeat it every single time. We are partners. We want to be treated as a partners. We are open for the dialogue. We have this dialogue. But again, we cannot be ruled by one or two countries like Germany or France.
Okay. The EU might argue that it would rather see plurality and diversity. But anyway, we're going to have to leave it there. Dominik, you're going to have the last word, because unfortunately...
We can say that we have tyranny. Just a one word. We are called populists. We are called this and that. I can say that we have tyranny of leftists in European Union. We can use any word we want, but is it reality? We have to answer ourselves.
Okay, Dominik, I will have to let you have the last word then, because we are completely out of time for this segment of the Newsmakers. Thank you all three so much for joining us.